Mixing or not mixing? Mixing or not mixing? Oh crap. Ooh, ooh,
Indiana Jones, all right!
What do you think, buddy? Should we mix or not? My music doesn't sound good because I don't know how to mix orchestral music. Oh, really? Yeah. If I knew how to mix orchestral music, that using the compressors and EQ and reverbs, then my music, then it would sound good. That, amigo mío, it's pure bullshit. Don't take me wrong, mixing is super important. Mixing is the kind of like the final 5-10% of your music. Mixing is going to elevate your music. That's what's gonna do. But initially, your music has to sound outstanding when you are done composing. I'm gonna put it this way. Mixing is not going to fix any composing mistakes. People say, well, mixing, the mastering. Here's how it goes. Mastering is not gonna fix any mixing mistakes. Mixing is not gonna fix any composing mistakes. What makes your music sound good is the composition side of things. A good composition, a good arrangement, a good orchestration, a good balance. When you are composing, when you are arranging, when you are the syncestration part of things, a good composition and knowing how to use your libraries and combine them well, that is what's going to create a good sounding mock-up. And then you can mix, or even if you're recording with an orchestra, including that, the recording in the mock-up or enhancing the recording with some samples. But even with a good orchestra and a good recording and a good mixing engineer, if your music's crap, it's not gonna sound good. Even if you are recording here in LA or in London with the best musicians. And so, should I mix my music? Yes, or absolutely, dude. 100% you should mix your music. Here's the thing. Yes, your mock-up should sound incredible. Or the recording session, the composition has to be good and the orchestration has to be good so the recording session goes well. But still, you should mix your music, of course. You should mix your music because mixing is what's gonna put your music to the next level. It's gonna elevate your music, whatever you've got. And here's the other thing. When you're composing, you're thinking, and you should think about music and balance and positioning the instruments the right way, but it's music. We're taking decisions when we're composing, thousands of decisions every time. Should I use this note or this other note? What type of melody? This chord, this other chord, the voicing, etc., counterpoint. But all these decisions are music related. And that's what we should be doing. That's where we have to put our focus and attention because we are composing and we are composers. Now, when it comes to mixing, Now, when you move to the next stage, and that's why I call this next stage, when you are composing, focus on music. When you are done composing, export your tracks, and I'll talk about the process in a second, and do your mixing in a separate project. Now that is going to give you so much clarity. I'm not talking about sound clarity here. I'm talking about mental clarity. When you are mixing, you're gonna be focused on mixing, and that's gonna give you so much more clarity because now you are just focusing on sound, not music composition, but sound. You're gonna be thinking about panning and compression and EQ and frequencies. When you are composing, you are thinking about notes. Now you are thinking about frequencies and sound. Another important thing is that when you are composing, you have a template or you don't have a template. If you have a template, your computer CPU is taking care of running that template. So that means that your CPU already has a lot of things to do already. Or if you don't have a template, you'll start with a blank project, with an empty project, you will start loading instruments. At some point, you will start saturating the processing power of your computer. Now, when you are mixing, you want to use the best plugins, the best reverbs, and those plugins will take CPU processing. When you have a template, most likely you're optimizing that template when it comes to plugins, etc., so it runs smooth. You won't be able to use the best plugins or the highest settings that are going to give you the best sound quality. But if you are done composing, and when you are done composing, export all the tracks to audio and import those tracks into a new project, the mixing project. You're also freeing up your computer, the CPU, to be able to use those plugins that take a lot of CPU power but sound great, and now you don't have all right, you're in. You get the point, I guess.
Yes.
So basically, yes, when you are mixing, look at this. This is the composing template. See how much going on here? I've got 937 tracks. Just loading that for the computer, the CPU is already at 30%. When I play this back, it goes up at like 40-50%. This template is very optimized. But just look at it, there's so much going on. And then if I get here, mixer, I have a series of stems that do sort of like a quick pre-mix for me. Plugins. Now, the choice of those plugins, very carefully I chose them, are plugins that add very, very little latency and they're very CPU efficient. Sometimes though, I wish I could use another plugin here, but I cannot use it just because it would add too much latency or it takes too much CPU power. You get the point. Let's just move on. So this is the process. You're gonna have your composing template, this guy right there. And you will have lots of tracks in your template if you've got a template. Or maybe you don't have a template, but as you start composing, you load one track. Here's your MIDI region that you just recorded, new MIDI region, and you'll start orchestrating this. These are your MIDI regions, meaning all these. I'll export all the stems from this track and I'll import them into a new blank template for mixing. This week I'm gonna be mixing and I'm gonna be documenting the mixing process, and I'll be posting a few videos. So all these tracks, maybe there are like, I don't know, like 50, 60 tracks. What I do is, instead of exporting those 60 tracks to audio for mixing, that would be too much work for me to mix. Parentheses, that's actually what you would do. Like if you want a mixing engineer to mix your music, they will ask for you to export every single track dry, without any added plugin or reverb. They will do that for you. They will ask you to export every single track to audio and send that to them. End of parentheses. Me though, I'm not gonna do that. Generally, I don't have that much time for mixing. So this is what I do instead. Okay, story time.
Once upon a time,
I was working on my first movie, a feature film, back in 2010. It was a TV movie. I was super excited. Usually I compose my music and I mix my music. But for this movie, I had to write 60 minutes of music in 27 days. So that is a lot of music. That's basically about 2 minutes of music per day, plus revisions and changes and rewrites. So that doesn't give you a lot of room for you to do the composition and mixing and mastering and then submitting the final mix with the step. It's just too much. It's not doable. And so basically for these type of movies where there's a low budget, meaning that you cannot hire someone to help you with that. Anyway, long story. For these type of movies, the sound of your mockup generally it's what you are sending to them. That's how it usually works. There's not much mixing. But here's the thing. There were a couple of tracks for that movie, for the main titles and the most important scene. There was a taste scene where I was like, I wish I could mix this, because it would elevate my music a little bit, and it needs a little bit of mixing. And so I didn't have time. I really didn't have time. But here's what I did, and that's a trick that it's very easy, and it makes a big difference when it comes to the sound of your final track, of your music. I exported the orchestra and percussion separately, and that gives you a lot of room. That gives you a lot of an opportunity to compress all the percussion, to open the orchestra, to add a little bit of reverb to the orchestra, to treat them differently, and we'll talk about these things in a few days, but to do a few things that make a big difference. So the way I did that is just in my composing template, I routed all the percussive tracks into a percussion stem or bass, and then all the orchestral tracks into an orchestra bass or stem, and I kept them there. And so because the result was so good with such a little effort, I kept those stems or those two basses there, and every time that I needed a quick mix, I would export the orchestra and percussion, and I would do a few things that makes it sound better. Now, at some point I was like, I wish I had just a tiny bit more flexibility. I started adding a few more stems, like one for an electric bass, sometimes I've got an electric bass, another one for synths. And then at some point I started separating the orchestra stem with woods, brass, strings. And so at some point they started having more like 5, 6, 10 stems, 12. So now we reach this point in my template. I've got more like 20, 25 stems. And I've got actually two options. I've got a group of 25 stems, and I've got another group of 5 stems. So that allows me to do something that I call mixing with the stems, which is basically a way of mixing that still gives you enough flexibility, or the amount of flexibility that you want, depending on if I export the 5 basic stems, orchestra, percussion, synths, etc., or the more like 25 stems where I've got a few stems for the strings, a few strings for brass, etc., all the synths, high pitch, low pitch, etc. But that gives me enough flexibility for mixing, for everything that I need to do when it comes to mixing, without making it overwhelming, having to mix 50, 60, 70 tracks, which is just, it takes forever. All right, that's everything that I wanted to share with you today. Tomorrow, we'll take a look at how to configure and set everything that I explained, how to do it with the sequencer. So we will go into the DAW, and I will take you step by step. It's going to be a little bit more like a tutorial. But other than that, remember that composition is key. So learn that first. I know that mixing sometimes sounds more sexy.
Sexy, very sexy.
Like, what plugin should I use, or what reverb should I use? But composition goes first. Other than that, link in description if you want to learn to compose orchestral music. It's a free class where I teach trailer music, love, sadness. Check it out. It's worth your time. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Really? I'm just gonna wait here. Why do this always happens to procrastinators? Takes forever for us to get things started, and then when you get it started, you've got all sorts of things that make it harder for you to actually get it done. I'm gonna stop right here because those birds are killing me. I figured I'll do this outside. It's gonna look different, it's gonna be different, whatever.